They who have not stood upon open water at night cannot know it. That particular quality of silence which is not silence at all, but something older and more patient. The sea does not threaten, it does not warn. It waits as it has always waited for the men who mistake its stillness for indifference. In the centuries when sail was the only covenant between a man and the horizon, the sea was not a place one travelled through. It was a condition one endured, or did not. Fear of it was not weakness. It was the one honest prayer a sailor offered, the only theology the deep would accept. What follows are 3 such offerings, 3 testimonies drawn from 3 different waters, 3 different ages of loss. They share no vessel, no crew, no latitude. They share only what all honest men who went to sea eventually shared, the knowledge that the ocean does not grieve what it takes, it simply keeps it. In the latter half of the 17th century, the herring fisheries of the Northern Isles were worked by open-decked vessels called yawls, shallow, nimble boats built for speed among the skerries, but utterly exposed to the brutal winter gales of the North Sea. A crew of 5 or 6 men would row and sail out before first light, often in darkness, guided by stars and the smell of the water. Death by drowning was so common it was seldom recorded as tragedy, only as weather. Most of these men could not swim. To learn to swim, it was said, was to delay what the sea had already decided. I will not tell you my name, for it matters no more than a rope's end matters after the rope is gone. I fished the Orkney waters for 11 seasons. I knew their temper the way a man knows the temper of a father who is sometimes kind. The knowing does not protect you. It only tells you afterwards that you should have known better. That January we went out 3 men short. Colder months had seen fuller crews, aye, and worse luck too, so none among us remarked upon it. Magnus was at the bow. Old Tam sat amidships, bailing as he always bailed, with the unhurried rhythm of a man doing a thing for the 10,000th time. I held the stroke oar. The water that morning was the colour of pewter that has been left in the dark too long, and the sky above it was no lighter. We could not see where one ended and the other began. We rowed into that grey union and did not speak of it. We had lines down before the light proper arrived. The haul was fair, not remarkable, but fair enough. It was Magnus who first said nothing. I mean that precisely. There was a moment when he had been speaking, low and steady, the way men speak at sea to keep the silence at bay, and then he was not speaking, and the silence that replaced him was of a different character entirely. I looked up from the line. He was staring to larboard. I could not see what he saw. The water there was the same as anywhere, grey, patient, entirely without feature. And yet his face had changed in the way that faces change when a man recognizes something he hoped never to see again. "What is it?" I said. Not a question. More the sound a man makes to remind himself he is still capable of making sounds. He did not answer. He was still looking at the water. Old Tam had stopped his bailing. In 11 seasons I had never seen Tam stop bailing. The boat rode lower for it, and none of us moved to correct her. There was something in the water to larboard. I will not call it a shape. A shape implies a boundary, and this had none. It was a quality of the water, a density where no density should have been, a darkness that did not belong to the depth. It moved with us, not toward us, with us, at the pace of a man walking slowly beside a cart. There was something in the water to larboard. I will not call it a shape. A shape implies a boundary, and this had none. It was a quality of the water, a density where no density should have been, a darkness that did not belong to the depth. It moved with us, not toward us, with us, at the pace of a man walking slowly beside a cart. I cannot account for how long we three sat thus. Time at sea is not the same as time ashore. The cold had gone past cold into something else, a flat, blank numbness that was not unpleasant, which I understand now to have been the beginning of a different kind of fear. Not the fear that sharpens a man, the fear that stills him. It was Tam who broke it. He lifted his bailer, he resumed his work. That single gesture, its absolute ordinariness, broke whatever had fastened us. Magnus looked away from the water. I hauled on the line. We did not speak of it then. We did not speak of it on the row home, nor on the path up from the landing, nor at any point in the years that followed. Magnus died the following spring, a different sea, a different day, nothing remarkable. Old Tam outlived us both, I am told. I left the fishing that autumn and did not return. I have been asked since what I believe it was. I have no answer that would satisfy anyone, including myself. What I know is this: the sea returned nothing to us that morning. It showed us something that was not for us to see, and then it took it back. And it was the taking back, the unhurried, indifferent withdrawal of it, that I have carried ever since. Not the thing itself, the certainty that the thing had no particular interest in us at all. By the mid-18th century, the long ocean crossings of the merchant trade had established a grim arithmetic of the mind. Any voyage lasting beyond 60 days risked what ship's surgeons of the period called the dissolution of faculties, a slow unravelling of reason brought on by monotony, isolation, and the particular weight of horizon after unbroken horizon. Captains were especially vulnerable, bearing alone the moral burden of every decision. The log was their only witness, and the log, of course, was written by the same hand that was dissolving. I, Thomas Greir, first mate of the brig Constance out of Bristol, set down here what I observed during the 74th through the 81st days of our southward passage, being the days in which Captain Alistair Vane ceased, in my honest estimation, to be entirely himself. I do not write this to condemn him. A man alone with the sea for 11 weeks is not the same man who stepped aboard. I have made the crossing 6 times. I know what it does. I write this only because if the Constance is lost, and I with her, someone should know that what happened was not madness in the common sense of the word. It was something quieter than madness, something more patient. It began with the charts. Vane had always been meticulous. 40 years at sea had made him so, and he took a craftsman's pride in his dead reckoning, his star sights, his margins of error reduced to the thickness of a pencil line. But on the 74th day I found him in the chart room at the 3rd hour of the morning watch, not working, sitting, the lamp burning, the chart spread before him untouched, his hands folded on the table. He did not acknowledge me. I withdrew. The following night, the same, and the night after. I began to note his log entries more carefully. The first change was small, a slight loosening of his usual precision, where before he had written made 12 knots, wind steady at 2 points abaft the beam. He now wrote only wind steady. Where he had marked the noon position to the quarter minute, he began marking only degrees. The ship was still being navigated. but something had gone out of the care of it. On the 78th day he came to me at the rail. I was taking the evening watch, and stood beside me for some time without speaking. This was not unusual in itself. Vane was not a conversational man, but when he did speak, he said, "Greir, do you find the sea changed these past days?" I said I did not know what he meant. He was quiet again. Then, "I have sailed this water 30 years. It is not the water I remember." He did not look at me when he said it. He was looking out at the dark, at the particular darkness that begins where the lamplight ends and continues, as we both knew, without interruption, to the far side of the world. "It knows the ship," he said. "It has known us since the Cape." I said nothing of sense in response to this. I made some sound that was neither agreement nor disagreement, and he nodded as though I had confirmed something and went below. I did not sleep that night. What followed I will put down plainly without embellishment, as a ship's record should be. Over the next 3 days Vane grew quieter. He ate less. He stood his watches with full competence. I want that understood, but there was a quality of attention in him, a constant sidelong attending to something the rest of us could not perceive, that began to communicate itself to the men. They would not name it. Sailors do not name things that might hear themselves named, but I saw it in them, that particular stillness that is not rest. On the 81st day he summoned me to his cabin and showed me the chart. He had drawn a line, not a course line, nothing I could interpret navigationally, a single slow curve from our current position to a point well off the charted sea, in blank water beyond the edge of the sheet. He did not explain it. He looked at it the way a man looks at a debt he knows he must eventually pay. "I will not follow it," he said, quietly, with great conviction. "Sir," I said, "I will not follow it," he said again, and rolled the chart, and that was all. He was himself again, more or less, within a fortnight. We made port at Recife without further incident. He never spoke of those days again. I did not raise them. I have written this down because I believe him, because I too, on the 81st night, standing at the rail in the dark, felt it, that line of attention extending out from the ship into the water. Not a threat, not a summons, something older than either, a recognition, patient and without urgency, that knew we were there and was content for now merely to note the fact. We were fortunate. The noting did not become wanting. I have heard of voyages where the distinction was less clear. The practice of taking soundings, lowering a weighted line to measure the depth and character of the seabed, was for centuries both a navigational art, and for those who practiced it long enough, something approaching a form of divination. Experienced pilots could read the colour, texture and smell of whatever the tallow at the lead's end brought back. Grey clay meant one channel, black sand another, fine white shells a third. The sea bottom, in this way, spoke haltingly in a language of sediment and depth. Some men listened to it too long. There was a leadsman aboard the Ketch Amaranth, whose name I shall render only as W, he having asked, in the one conversation I had with him, that his full name be kept from any written account. He was not a superstitious man in the common way of sailors. He kept no charms, observed no private rituals, laughed at the ordinary omens with the ordinary heartiness. But in the matter of soundings he had arrived, through long practice, at a position I can only describe as reverence. He had worked the western approaches for 18 years. He knew the bottom, he told me. the way a blind man knows a room he has lived in long enough, not by sight but by a kind of accumulated memory in the hands. Each cast of the lead told him something, not merely depth and composition, but, and here he paused, watching me for the reaction such statements produce, disposition. Whether the bottom was, on a given day, willing to be known. I did not laugh. Something in his manner made laughter impossible. In the late autumn of the year in question, he would not give me the year, and I did not press it. The Amaranth was feeling her way through fogs some leagues west of the Scilly Isles, taking soundings every quarter hour. We had been at the lead since the second dog watch. The fog was of that particular quality that absorbs sound. The crew moved and spoke, but seemed to do so at a remove, as though heard through wool. He had been noting the readings in chalk on the board. 40 fathoms grey clay, 38 grey clay, 41 grey clay. Consistent, ordinary. The bottom being what it should be in those waters. At the 6th sounding, the lead came back clean, not merely without material, clean. The tallow at its base, which should have brought back whatever the bottom gave, was smooth and pale and entirely unmarked, as though it had touched nothing. And yet the line had gone 43 fathoms. He measured it twice. He cast again, 43 fathoms. Again, the tallow returned as blank as if new dressed. He stood at the rail and held the lead in his hands for some time. The fog moved around him. The ship moved under him. The water below showed nothing. Not even its own surface in that light seemed entirely present. He told me that what he felt then was not fear precisely. It was closer to what a man feels when he enters a familiar room and understands, before he understands why, that something in it has been moved. Nothing is wrong that he can name. Everything is where it should be. And yet, he did not report the anomaly. He marked the depth in chalk, 43 fathoms, and left the material column empty, and said nothing to the mate when the watch changed. What could he have said? The lead found nothing. Leads always found something. He had no language for the alternative. The Amaranth made port without incident. We signed his last articles the following spring, and did not go to sea again. He was not, he said, afraid of the water. He was not afraid of what the water might contain. What he had lost, in that fog, was the conviction that the water was, in any sense that mattered, indifferent to him. It's not the depths, he told me. A man can make peace with the depths. There's precedent for that. It's the... And he stopped, and looked at his hands, and seemed to search them for the word. He did not find it. It's the bottom knowing you were there, he said at last, and choosing to give you nothing. I have thought about that sentence for many years. I have not yet decided whether it frightens me because I do not understand it, or because, standing there in the lamplight watching his face, I understood it perfectly. Men have always returned to the sea, not because they forgot what it took from them, but because forgetting was never an option the sea offered. It keeps everything, the ships, the names, the long particular silences of men who went down, still knowing what they'd seen. The water closes over all of it with the same unhurried patience. It does not mourn, it does not need to. Till the next tide, good shipmate.